All right, so 13.
Let's go.
Today's episode, we're going to be doing a Diary of a CEO episode. Starting to be a favorite of mine, Diary of a CEO. And today's is going to be the guest, Reid Hoffman. The title of the podcast is about the longest title I've ever seen. Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn founder, it's time to quit your job when you feel this. Selling LinkedIn for $26 billion taught me this about life. Trump is going to punish me. They're like, I don't know what they're shooting for, all the keywords or something, but the longest title I've ever seen. I guess it's a pretty good summary of the podcast, but yeah, I have heard Reid Hoffman on All In podcast, and he came off on All In as a pretty far left guy in general, and he seemed pretty smart on All In, but I didn't have much more than that in understanding who he is. So this podcast was really good. I found him to be he is left leaning. I would describe him as left leaning, like genuinely. He's very understanding of both sides, and just like not just politics, but just like how to operate companies and stuff. And I thought he had a lot of really good takes throughout the podcast. The main theme is founding companies. So they talk about the different types of founders, founder mentality, go to markets, venture capital. It's like if you're into these Silicon Valley like SaaS companies, VC, it's a really good podcast. I really liked it just because of that topic. Really, I had it at a 90.
Wow.
It is. I wanted to go higher, but I rated the Diary of CEO with Brian Armstrong at a 90, and I was like, I don't know if it's better than that. I think it was about the same for me, but I genuinely really like learning about founders, and it's becoming more obvious to me as I'm rating podcasts because like I don't know if I could have put the words like what my favorite podcasts are beforehand, but now like when I'm evaluating it, it's these stories of founders because they're really unique people, right? For the most part, like you have to be. And Reid Hoffman, he wasn't necessarily like he's not like Brian Armstrong, as in he was like an individual founder himself, but he's like he knows all the ins and outs of what makes a good founder in these early stage companies. So it was cool to hear his perspective. All right, I just rambled on there, Sterling. What's your rating? What are your
I
thoughts?
thought you covered it all. I don't have anything else to add to that. That was perfect. I had an 85. I like it. I thought what you're talking about with the Diary of CEO becoming a favorite of yours. Me too. Like the dude's talented. He is a great interviewer. I caught myself thinking that a couple times throughout the interview. Um, and he's in that sweet spot where he's our age. He has, I don't know. I relate to him a lot. Um, But it's funny. I don't think the title was very good. I thought it was more about being a founder, which, you know, the title doesn't really talk about. If you're worried about the Trump thing, it's like 10 minutes.
I don't
I
even know if it's 10 minutes, maybe two.
Yeah, it was very short. They clearly put it in there because that gets clicks.
Maybe I said it was a good title because I'm with you. Like it probably isn't the most accurate, but we've had some pretty bad clickbaity titles, and this is on the lesser side of like the super clickbaity titles. It still is, but
It's got 3 exclamation points in it.
yeah, maybe I'm just talking out of my butt. Maybe I think you got a point here.
But I mean, so I thought Reid came off as very thoughtful. Um, he is a lefty, but he's my type of lefty, if that makes sense.
Like
Um,
he will be reasonable. Like
right.
he has takes I don't agree with, but you feel like you could leave like a conversation with him feeling okay instead of like that was a useless conversation. Like he's
Yeah.
reasonable.
And there's a couple times where he was set up with questions to really slam the right and be argumentative, and he really did. He took them all with grace, and I honestly believed he was like his comment about like Even though the person I didn't like got elected, I'm still an American. I still want America to succeed. I thought that was a really cool response from his
I mean,
part,
you don't hear that take
and it
often,
felt
like
genuine.
anymore. Yeah.
It felt real. He was a very likable. Like he was like almost as like a Santa Claus figure, like this approachable, jolly white
He,
dude.
yeah, I agree.
But yeah, um, so that was I liked it a lot. I would highly recommend this one.
Yeah, and it's like from the start. It's hitting the ground running
It
because
really
there's a
is.
lot of podcasts where you're like, maybe 15, 30 minutes in. But this one is like there's not really a dull moment. And also Diary CEO doesn't typically do 2 hours, and it was over 2 hours.
Yeah, it was 2.5. It was real. Those are good.
Um, so I guess at the beginning, um, so it's cool doing this process of the follow up podcast because you see a lot of common threads throughout podcasts. Um, One of the common threads is being in early career development. You want to be in an area that has the opportunity that is innovating. And
Yep.
he credited growing up to Silicon Valley to basically he wouldn't have ever been successful if he didn't grow up in Silicon Valley.
Or the
Um,
same level was kind of his point.
yeah, and I mean, you hear that all the time, but I thought it was just another point that hammered home the like importance of network and opportunity, like putting yourself in those positions, and then you're gonna have to be lucky on top of that, but you're just increasing your odds, putting yourself in that environment.
Yeah, you're right. There has been a couple common threads with the very successful people. That's one of them, right? Being in the right spot at the right time is clearly that lucky draw that when you add it to the hard work and the perseverance that they all talk about, that's the magical combination. The other one was don't follow your passions. I think we've heard that 3 times since we started this as well. It's like go out there, find something you're good at, go make money, and then you can do what you're passionate about. Now, hopefully, you're passionate about what you're doing, but don't go out to save world hunger first. You having fun over there?
Yeah, sorry. Um, no, I agree, and I think his take on risk tolerance at the very end of the podcast kind of was spot on with that as well because um, he had kind of the same idea as me of like if you're like when you're evaluating risk, right? Not only, especially if you're gonna do like take on a job or something that's high risk or high reward, high risk, building like your network out of people, building the plan B's out. He explained it as like you have plan A, and then you have plan B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, B6. Like I think that's how I look at it. Is like I mean, obviously, I haven't taken any really big risk, but I think if I were in a position too, I would feel comfortable doing it because I have all these sub plan Bs that I would be comfortable with falling onto.
Yeah, and they had that portion where it's like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Um, like you can't really lose your network. Like even if
Yeah,
you get fired, you still have those people at that job that would reference you or help you off your feet for some reason. So, and there's, I was reading 4 Hour Work Week earlier this week, and Tim Ferriss had a lot of that in his 4 Hour Work Week, the book that made him famous, where it's like those risk one, write them out to figure out how you're going to mitigate them, but you should also say even if the worst things happen, are they permanent? Are they forever, or can you recover? It's it definitely helps you jump off that ledge when you're looking at it like a ledge.
Mhm. I think a lot of the times, like, I mean, this might be dramatic, but when you think about like someone if they're wanting to start a company, I think that as long as they get like past a year or have something to show of the company they left to go start, like that's like a huge resume item. Like
That's
I
true.
was like in a founding group of a company that made a initial round of investments or did X before it failed. It's like that's like a great. You might not understand at the time of like, hey, like, because you might be worried if it fails, right? But even if it does fail, like you you're still probably growing a lot and making a better name for yourself. I think that's a very important part of that decision making process is understanding like the positive effects of failing.
Yeah. So I when we were going through these, he had a lot of questions um to let you know if you're cut out to be a startup. You ready for him?
Yep.
I want to hear how Conley does. Uh how do you know if you have a good idea? Are you the right person to pull it all together? Am I the one in motion right now? Did I quit my job and go all in? Have you thought about those things for, when you're looking at risk?
Um, yeah, so I think we can just get into it. I'll be vague, but there's this someone I know came up to me with the app idea, and he was wanting to find someone to help do it with him. Um, and he wanted a partner, not someone to like pay, right? And he was really worried. He's like, "Well, just like get back to me." Like after we talked about it for a couple hours, he was like, "Get back to me and let me know like if this is something like you'd be passionate about or want to do." I'm like, "Dude, I'm all in. Like it sounds like a good idea. Like we're gonna go home and we're gonna at least because here's my take. I think too many people spend too much time trying to make the perfect plan. You're not if it's something you've never done before, you're not going to make a perfect plan. You just got
Mhm.
to iterate. You got to and it's probably the software developer mindset, but you just got to make something and then just keep iterating. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think one of them was like, is your plan already in motion? I think I'm a very ambitious person, and that helps me. Like as soon as something's thought of, like I'm not spending time like really it's very obvious to me if something's worth it or not. So it's either yes or no. Like I'm not like someone who needs a whole week to think about it for the most part. So I think I fit that uh, specific part of it. What was he had another one was to be you are you going to go through the rest of these? Because I
Well,
had
so I'm glad
notes
you
on
brought that
it
up because the other ones were
too.
about about your vision and your pitch. That so you obviously got a pitch recently and it worked. What did he do?
um. Well, I think obviously it has to be a good idea. Um, two, um, I, these might be general things, but you have to be, I think, addressing a specific issue. Like in a pitch, it has to be, I would like it to be simple and addressing a specific issue. Um, and another thing that really helps is if it's simple. I've heard a couple times is if you can't explain an idea like that in a sentence, then it's probably not good. Um, and maybe that's just a sense of hey, you need to break it down more. Because
So
most
is
of the
his pitch simple?
it was it started off as that one sentence, and then he explained um, the issues he recognized in the process and how he thought it could be solved.
Mm.
So yeah, he did a great job. He's a great talker. He's honestly we were just kind of on the same page too with most stuff and. Uh, Yeah, I mean, it was funny because um, he knew that I listened to podcasts, and I said something about the founder podcast, and he said he listened to it, and I had genuinely never met anyone else who listened to it. And that was probably like when I started my job, my first software development job. I was listening to the Founders podcast like every episode that came out, and that was probably like 3 years ago. I I don't listen to him much anymore. I don't like the people he picks. I feel like he went through a lot of the good people, and he's on episode like 400 now. So he's kind of like going on less interesting people for me at least. But it was really cool that like it was like one of those things where like we just kind of hit it off too. So I think that helped a lot. Um, and then also I just like I don't know if it was in uh, a media video or a podcast, but it was explaining how ambitious people need to be around other ambitious people to flourish. Because you'll kind of be drugged down by people who aren't as ambitious. Um, and it's something that like once you find that group of people you're with, like when you're flourishing, it can be a really cool experience. So I think I kind of had a little bit of that too. Like we're just a good match. I think that's important.
Yeah.
You'll hear that in a lot of venture capital people is like not only the idea, but they have to uh, like the founder. Um, I went off on a tangent there, so I probably went way past the question.
Did he like so Reid talked about explaining the risk of the pitch to build like credibility that what you're pitching is real. Did he explain like what would happen if it didn't hit off or what the chances of that were?
Um, yeah. So when he was addressing risk, because my first thing was like, why is this not already a product? Like, it seemed like something that should have already been out there. Um, and he initially addressed that as just something that uh, he was not. He believed it was genuinely a good idea, and he wasn't worried about um, there being a competitor out there. Um, Partially, in fact, because I talked to him about this. I was like, I can't believe there's not a competitor. And after I looked into it, I said, even if there is a competitor, they're not doing a good job. So there is like room for it.
Mm.
Um, so he didn't do a great job, I think, at um, identifying the risk and the competition and who's tried it before, why'd they fail. That was kind of stuff I started to look into after the fact. Um, so probably the pitch could have done a little bit more risk analysis, but also for me, all I'm risking is my time, my free time, working on it. Really, like I'm not losing anything. That's the
Yeah.
beauty of software companies, right? SaaS companies is the overhead to create it is very low.
Right. Right.
So it's pretty cool. Also, side note, I started using Cursor, which is a development environment um, is like it's one of the biggest AI development environment IDEs is what they're called, and it is like 10 times better than like Chat GPT. Like using the chat box in Chat GPT or Anthropic to ask code questions. I don't know what they're doing, but it is like so
Really.
good. Like you can add files in from your code base uh, that it has knowledge of, and it is just like I mean, it kind of changed my perspective of AI in terms of being a development tool because it's so much better than these chatbots, like even GPT, when it's integrated into the IDE and has all the proper information. And I think it's kind of doing something like the Chat GPT 01 or 10 that it has like an inner dialogue. So like it'll respond and then it'll ask itself like questions on its response to get a better response. So I think it's doing stuff like that in the background, and that's why it's a lot better.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I mean
so
that
it's
that by itself can go on your resume, right? I work this side project, got these
yeah,
skills.
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed it too along the way. So it's been fun for me to be honest.
That's cool. Why do you think no one's done it before? Like, do you think it's a crazy idea?
Um,
Reid
there's
talked
been
about like smart. If smart people think it's not possible, it's a good sign you're on to something big.
if there's been a big company that tried to tried to solve this problem um within a new product release, so it wasn't like specific to it. It was kind of like supposed to encapsulate it as well, and I think it needs to be addressed specifically. Um, uh,
Mm.
I think that's going to be what's going to set it apart, um, and why this bigger company failed at it, and why we could succeed is address the issue specifically instead of kind of be a catch-all. Um,
Mm.
Basically doing it right. So there's and also we're kind of in the early stages where I see two different approaches to go at it, and I haven't decided on which one's better. I think one approach is going to be a better way to go at it with less funding, and could be genuinely just as good than another approach that's going to require more funding to get it off the ground. Um, so I don't know. I don't. I think we just go. We might even start with the one that would require less funding and feel like if it needs to transform into other one, go there. I think that's probably what we'll do. Um, but still early stages. I mean, we're still putting the. I'm working on the database and server, and I have some early endpoints up. So it's just like very initial phases still. Um, but hopefully in a month or two we'll have a prototype and start working on it, getting a better idea of what we want to see.
That's cool. How much are you working on? Like, how much does it take?
Um,
What are you
past like
risking?
past like 3 weeks, um, probably at least 10 hours a week outside of work, and that's on top of doing this podcast, and that's why I haven't been as good at releasing the videos. I know the first week probably I didn't spend a whole lot of time developing, but I spent a lot of time researching and coordinating, kind of starting a development team for it. We got one other developer who's going to be working on the app part of it, and he's really good. But I mean, we sat down one Saturday for like I think it was like 4 hours just talking about it. Because at the beginning we really needed to define the scope of the product. I mean, that's ground or the starting phase is blueprint, right?
Mhm.
Uh, so I mean, that day alone, just talking was 4 hours, and I think when I got the idea pitched to me that night, I didn't sleep. I was up till like I was up till like probably two, just in my bed thinking about it. Um, Side note, uh, the guy who initially had the idea, he has a coffee company, and I want to get him on here and talk to him about it because he's good. He's good at talking, and he had me he had me all in on his coffee company. So yeah, I think he'd be a great guy to bring on the podcast and have as a first guest. So we can talk about that later. But I think it'd be a fun episode.
That's cool. I love when you know you're onto something exciting when you lose sleep over it, like voluntarily, not like stressed lose sleep, but like excited, brain can't shut off, lose sleep. That's that's one of the I miss that. My current job doesn't have it, right? And
Uh,
it's something I've been chasing since I left it.
do you remember that app idea you had? I'm sure we can talk about it at this point, but it was
Yeah,
like it.
it's still $1 billion idea. I maintain that.
I had brought this up to him, and he was like, I had that's one of my ideas I've thought about for the longest time, and he was telling me because like he was a chiropractor, and worked at a clinic here in town, and he was talking to me about how that would be possible with like standardizing that because like they have forms, I guess, or something, but
Yeah,
we had briefly talked about that one too.
dude. If you figure it out, it's gonna be it's one of those huge ideas, and I think that's where I really stalled. And it's not like software is not kind of my thing. Um, but yeah, if you give people the power over their data in all walks of life, I don't see a single person on the planet that wouldn't use it.
Hmm.
And so like that's if your audience is the entire planet, you don't even have to you don't even have to try to be profitable on that one. You just have to build it.
Yeah, that's another thing when we're talking about risk, uh, evaluating the risk. Like, if I do this and it doesn't turn into anything, well, I have a great skill, and now the next time this opportunity comes up, I'm going to be like two times, five times
That's right.
better at working on it. Um, and I think this was the first time I like agreed. Sorry to allude to a different podcast, but with David Sachs when he was talking about how AI is allowing people, developers, to all become 10x developers. Because I genuinely felt like a 10x developer using Cursor, um, which is crazy. Because I I had a hard time believing that wasn't like almost clickbaity things to say, but man, yeah, I'm feeling good like developing. I'm like I texted the other guy I was working with. I was like, dude, I hammered out some stuff tonight. Like, we're
That's cool.
rolling. Um,
That's really cool.
and it's crazy because, like, with programming, I think, I don't know if you would have heard this a lot, but once you learn one language, typically people say it's like easier to learn more. And that's with like languages in general, and that's with like coding. Once you understand like the base level, like the low level knowledge, like you should be able to apply, you should be able to pick up any language. And I think what Cursor's doing is allowing me to pick up these new languages a lot quicker because a lot of it is just understanding the syntax, the words to use, the how do
Yeah.
you frame this to get it to work, right? Like I know what I want, so now I
Right.
can just describe it and kind of craft or and kind of just push it in the right directions rather than building each post.
It's like
Um,
a translator for you.
yeah, it really is. And
Like I talk in C++. I want to do the same thing in Java. How do I
mhm,
do this? Wow,
yeah,
that's cool. That's
um,
really cool.
and it's with everything. I hope everyone thinks of it this way, but with everything with AI, it's such a early phase. So like
Yeah.
when I get excited about this stuff, it's like good, but like in my head, I'm like thinking 2 years outward, and it's like phenomenal, um, which is just crazy to think of. I yeah.
Almost scary. Like
Hmm.
if it's really 10x now, then it's gonna you, you gotta picture it like logarithmically improving. So it's gonna be 100x and then 1000x. But that means like there's only a certain amount of software that needs to be generated out there. There's a lot more, so no one's going to lose their jobs when it's 100x because now you just
Yeah.
have 100 more softwares.
You just get more specific, better products. Because like I think a great example is you go around town. Maybe most people don't do this, but I was talking to the guy with the app idea, and he was like, "There are so many places with horrible processes, horrible software automation," and I'm just like, they need help. And I think you're just going to see a lot of these smaller operations, like in like towns of 100,000 people, like those smaller businesses just start to get a lot better software, and even more mid-range companies just there's going to be a lot of better solutions to these problems.
That'd be a cool job. Like be Springfield's. I'll fix your dinky little software for you. without
Yeah.
charging you like the same thing it would, one of the big boys would cost.
I think if you did that and you got a couple customers, you would like instantly become a company because one thing about software is it always tends to need it. I'm not gonna say tends. It always needs maintained. Like there will
Because it
either
changes
be issues,
fast.
there will be issues that come up, or people are gonna want more out of it.
Yeah,
And
more
it's like
capability.
if you could get your foot in the door, like you would, I think, be pretty solid. Um, I kind of like the idea of getting into app development because I think there's a lot of people who want apps built, a lot of small companies that want apps built, um, and there's a lot of money there.
One of the ideas, again, I don't have passion in this area, so it's not for me. But if you bought all these boomers are retiring in their business, right? And you bought their business, it's a plumbing gets used over and over again, so I'm not going to use that. It's a um, what's a good one? It's
Carpet cleaner.
a carpet cleaning service, and they have 100 customers regularly, and they do $1 million a year. You pay them 3x their profit. You give them $3 million for it, but you immediately upgrade the software. You do some social media marketing, and I think a lot of those businesses could be like 10x because they've been run by boomers the same way for the last 30 years, and they're just surviving based off being there, having
Mhm.
that clientele. Um, if you infuse technology in there, I I bet there's millions to be made in small markets.
Yeah, I think about that more than I probably should, because like I do feel like there's smaller markets. Like I feel like a lot of the people running those businesses aren't as
They
driven
don't
for
even know. I
as
don't
they
think they
should.
even know it's out there.
Yeah.
Not in their grasp, at least. They don't think that I can go to Wix. Is Wix the name of the software that makes websites? And like make a legit website. Like I could. Like, but they just assume they're not capable of doing it. That or they're extremely comfortable, which I think is a lot of it. I mean, they've made millions already. They're chilling. That I mean, it's exciting, but it's also scary because at 100x, everyone gets their own tailored software, and all the software is perfect. At 1000x, half the software engineers lose their job. At 10,000x, 90% of them lose their job.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like you have to be at the leading edge. So you
Yeah.
gotta, it's like you gotta adopt it, or because I had someone at my last job, like because I was always talking about AI, and they're like, "You better be careful, you're gonna lose your job." And I told them, I said, "I'm not gonna lose my job. Everyone else is, because I'm gonna know how to use it.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna be the one who introduces it. Like that's you got the wrong perspective. I don't know if I should be telling you that, but you got the wrong perspective."
Yeah. So here's what I've been mulling on this over for a while, and this podcast I think hit the same. I think what I want to do is I am super frustrated that Northrop won't let me use AI for anything I do. Like Northrop, even on Northrop computer, I can't go to ChatGPT because they're so concerned about two things. One, I'll input my data to get the answer, and now my data will be owned by Microsoft or whatever. And two, if I use ChatGPT to make my product better, they're worried the owner of ChatGPT will have a claim to part of that profit. And so they're just paralyzed. Nothing, no part of Northrop Grumman. There's some, hey, we're using AI in this corporate world, probably in the technology transformation office, where they're like, oh, AI is coming. But Northrop's this huge company that makes all sorts of cool stuff, not using the most powerful tool invented since the internet.
Mhm.
And it is so frustrating. And I'm this close to that new job that I've been chasing. One of the things I really want to do is I want to be the guy that constantly won't shut up about using AI in the corporate world. Because I think the corporations are going to be so slow to incorporate these that, and it's going to take some learning, right? It's going to be hard. It's going to change a lot of people's jobs. But if you figure it out, if you win that race, you will be you'll be doing good. So
So,
that's my new goal.
so my take, so I think to implement, and do you hear the term AI agents a lot?
On podcasts, not at work.
Do you know what that means?
Yeah, like you have your travel agency. Instead of it being a person, it's a AI robot that's just good at booking hotels and flights.
So when they're talking about agents, they're talking about specific models to solve specific issues. So when we look at ChatGPT, it is solving the like a chat dialogue issue. It's not it's a general to me it's a general solution. It's a general model. It's not tailored for AI. So when I use ChatGPT to help me code, it's good. But when I use Cursor AI to help me code, it's great. And I
Mm,
think that is something that's not understood yet by a lot of corporations is when we're talking about using AI agents, we're not talking about just using a chatbot. We're
right.
talking about deep integration, like foundational integration into productivity tools or products. Like not just a layer on top. That's not the future. It's genuine agents designed from the ground up to solve these problems or enhance our performance. And that's when you're going to start getting these huge gains, not just using a chat dialogue to help you write an email. Like that's that's just like that's just a little fluff on top. That's not it.
Right.
That's not what's going to help your company excel. It's creating these agents to turn your workers into these 10x workers. And that's where the success is going to be at. I think that's what you're saying too.
Right. They got to get past this whole like so they for the accountant to use an accountant agent, it's going to have to feed that agent the company's data. They're going to have to find a way past that where that data doesn't share.
So I'll go on top of this. Old company I worked for, I still talk to some people there, and they don't use AI at all. And I was talking to one of them, and he's like, "Well, if you think about the company's perspective, they don't want." Sorry, David, I didn't mean to make it sound like that. I'll just keep going. If you think about the company's perspective, it's a risk that they're not willing to take. I'm like, well, if you look around, everyone in that company is using ChatGPT, but they're using the free tier, which one does not send encrypted messages, and two trains on that data. So either they need to tell everyone to actually stop using it, or just use the enterprise license that has encrypted messages and does not train on your data. So they're just being ignorant to the fact of it's AI is introduced into this world. People are using it. You better, I guess, maybe cut it off or just embrace it, not half-ass it.
And how close are we to me being able to prompt a AI into making a printer software? That
Yeah.
I'm sure it's more complicated than I'm thinking. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it takes a lot of very smart people to do
I
it.
don't know, dude. I, I, I don't know about.
They don't have much of a moat, is what I'm saying. I think
Gosh,
the bigger risk to losing the data is being replaced.
I
Just
agree. And something I said to him was like, well, because on top of his spiel of that, he was like, what if like they're worried about like ChatGPT having our company data even in the enterprise? Like, do we know they're not using it? I'm like, one, you're just not going to trust any enterprise companies when they say they're not going to use your data because they store all their code in GitHub. That's the same basically enterprise company. You're trusting them like you're buying their product and trusting that they don't use your data. I'm like, all these models are trained on public uh, GitHub repositories, so you're trusting them not to train on your private companies. So you're trusting companies anyways. And so that is a horrible explanation. Like, it's not like you're trusting people anyways. So saying you
Yeah.
can't trust ChatGPT or Anthropic is not a good excuse. Um, yeah. Uh, do you have any specific question that I was addressing there?
No, no, I didn't.
Uh,
I
we're yeah, go
I
ahead.
liked Reid Hoffman's framing a lot in this podcast because he was constantly saying like, "What is your strategic advantage over other people?" And this market is changing. It's changing slowly because of all these fears. One of your anybody listening to this can say, "I'm going to start embracing it quickly." And yes, there'll be some risk, but I think the reward is outweighed those risks. If you're just going fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're still on the thread of the things that Reid Hoffman said make you a good to ask if you're a good entrepreneur or not. And one of those is, do you have a competitive edge in the area you're
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be an entrepreneur in? That's me. That could be your competitive edge right now. I mean,
Yeah,
everyone,
just
all the new companies say AI, but are they BSing? Like, is it? I think most of them are not genuinely using AI. A lot of them say they implement it in their software. Um, doesn't seem like the AI I think about um, when they're talking about the products. I think the first wave is going to be these agents to help workers be more productive. And I think that's where it's going to be at. We're
yeah.
going to see that there's like 10x, or the new products in the market is going to be these productivity enhancers.
One thing I'd be really curious is like if you're this big AI company, is your accountant using AI? I keep coming back to accountant because they're bean counters, right? They're what computers are great at. I
Mm-hmm.
can't like is Anthropic's accountant using AI to 10x their abilities too?
Yeah, I that's a good question. I would almost, if I were guessing, I bet they third party most of that stuff, and hopefully, I would imagine they're third partying it to the software company next door that's doing that's solving that issue with their models. I would, I would guess that's how it is, but who knows?
Well, I mean, so there's like the workdays of the world that are selling you software to help you, and yeah, accounting as well. But what do you do with that data? You need people for. That's where AI can come in, right? Right now we have thresholds. Trip a threshold. Okay, my CPI is below 0.9. I need to go figure out why there's a cost problem. Now, if I had an AI, I could say, okay, tell me exactly which CRs I spent more than what I estimated on, and then go to the CCB file in Confluence and tell me who worked them and was there any setbacks and all this stuff. I mean, that takes half a day to figure out all those reasons, document them. Instead, you could just have an AI crank all that out because everything's digital now. You could have them spit it out and then you just go sanity check it. I That's 10x. That's the 10x we're talking about. I think that's available today.
Yeah, uh, yeah. I wonder what companies are solving like that specific issue. There's got to be some out there.
Maybe I. So have you been listen? You listened to All In this week? Like the past couple weeks, Jason's done a really good job asking um, Friedman if he uses AI in his company, and he's one of those that it sounds like he not necessarily using AI, but he's like developing his own software with the helps of AI tools. That's more what I'm thinking about. Like, I think waiting for these big companies or these new startups to come save you in your individual domains. I think one of the powerful parts about AI is you don't need that anymore, right? You now have that power internally with a small dev team. And like, so I've always been big on data. When I come into a new role, I want to hire my data guy. So important. What I think is next is I'm going to hire a data guy and I'm going to hire a software guy. And that software guy is just going to use whatever AI tools that I think will solve scaling problems. So ideally, if I have one accountant, and I think I need three, because my program is taking off, right? It's scaling. It's going from low rate production to high rate production. I think the future is, okay, how do I make that one accountant three times more um three times
Productive.
more, yeah, thank you. And I, instead of going out and hire two other accountants, I'm going to say, hey, accountant, you work with the software guy and start automating what you do and using AI to fill in gaps that just make you more productive, make you more faster. I think that is doable now, and I want to take a swing at that. And I think it's
Yeah.
going to make some waves in a lot of corporate offices, because I think a lot of corporate offices are going to tell you no, you can't do that.
One thing I would say about that is right now, I think that's a great goal to have and something to try to do. The hardest thing I see about that is finding the right software guy to be able to implement AI. I don't think there's very many of them out there. Because when we're talking about AI implementation, I'm thinking about Cursor AI. I listened to the 4 hour podcast on Lex Friedman with the Cursor founders, and those guys were nuts. The things they were talking about, I was like, I'm gonna have to listen to this one again, um, because they were like, I mean, the how much went into implementing AI into Cursor from a ground up was like it was. There's way more into it than I thought, and I think it's very obvious to when I was explaining how much better it is. Like they genuinely understand AI. They understand the how it works and how to implement it. I think to find someone to do that as the software guy and implement AI from the ground up to solve an accounting issue, I think at this point it'd be hard with the limited expertise in like AI implementation. Like maybe that's the new job that's going to be developed is AI implementation engineer.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where it is. You don't have to know how to develop AI and make it better, but are you, is there going to be positions that just implement AI? Because from what I understand, really all you need is one of these open source models, large language models. It seems like that's how everyone's solving their issues. So maybe that's the new position that replaces a lot of software development or accountants and um, HR or whatever.
Yeah. First off, I like when smart people tell me I can't do it. So thank you. No,
I
it's
just
like,
identified your first bottleneck, the
that's
first
right.
issue you're gonna have. I didn't say you
So
can't do it,
I know,
but
I know.
you're good.
The When you're looking for engineers, the easiest tell you're going to get a good engineer is if they have these little projects off to the side, right? Yeah, like you, right? When they're
I'll be your AI implementation consultant.
like currently on my team, if you have a welding kit in your garage or you have a radio in your garage, you're the engineer. I think if you just go find the software guys that have these little side projects and they're diving in the cursor to develop this app, I don't think it's gonna be hard to find. And we actually have a lot of software talent in this town in Huntsville, so I think we can do it. But that might be a new job code. Like I might even call it that. Like,
Dude, we're
hey,
gonna have to clip that. I might have just found the new title for the new position that's gonna be created.
I mean, they made up data scientist when
Yeah, and that's a
that came around.
stupid name. It's
There's a podcast I was listening to that's telling me the origin of that. It's like this, they're trying
uh,
to hire these
I think it was all
PhDs.
in.
Was it?
Friedberg and Tremoth or Promoth. were debating on who started it. I think Friedberg had the first, and then Chamath iterated on it to name it data science.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was all in that they were talking about that because they were early on at Google, and I don't know where Friedberg was, but yeah.
Friedberg was Google. Chamath was Facebook.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, dude,
Yo,
clip it. I think that one's gonna stick. That made too much sense to me.
yeah, I think that's. I could really see that becoming a position. Um, Along those lines, the podcast started off with like I didn't know this, but Reid Hoffman's been in a lot of huge companies. Um, right, he was part of the PayPal mafia. He made his billions in LinkedIn as a founder. He's now a VC capitalist guy. He's invested a lot of winners. But what I was thinking through that is like how like multiplying it can be to be on the right team at the right time.
Yep.
And I would just encourage people like if you think the company or the project you're on isn't exciting, isn't growing, I think growing's the biggest thing to look for. Growth solves so many problems and creates so much opportunity. Then I would highly, highly, highly recommend going and chasing it. Don't like we have this thing where it's like when Kevin Durant left the Thunder to go to the Warriors, he was chasing rings, he was joining the best team. I would tell you to do that exact thing in your career. If you think there's a company that's going to win or a program that's going to be better, go get in on it early, help it grow, and you will find that opportunity just sucks you up.
So one of the thoughts I had on the podcast, um, boomers probably, um, are the ones that like they stay at jobs forever. Um,
Right.
I had the thought like, it probably isn't too new of a thought, but like, was LinkedIn the beginning of like the job hopping and people leaving their jobs? It seems like that very well could have been like the beginning of it, of people not staying places for 30 years because they can see job postings or someone left to this company is making X number. Like, why am I still here? You know, I was like, that was one of the thoughts I had when I was listening to it. I was like, oh,
I think
maybe
the
that's
internet in general is more to blame. Like you would have never saw a post from I would have never saw a posting from Northrop Grumman to go work in California when I was in Missouri, right?
yeah. And you can interview online, right? Because traditionally
Right.
you would have a person for all that, and then
And you got
what are they
Zoom.
flying in people to interview?
But I also think I if I had a credit to anything, I would say it's more the fault of the corporations. They abused that loyalty. They took away pensions,
Question.
and they told people that it's no longer worth it to you to stay at this company because I know change is uncomfortable. I know you don't want to move your spot, so you're not going to go get that new job. So I'm not going to give you the promotion when you deserve it or the raise when you deserve it.
Yep.
Like corporations pushed people out as much as the internet gave them the opportunity.
I agree. I can agree with you more that um what I saw at the last company I was at was in a really an abuse of our employees are comfortable, they have families, and they don't want to take risks, so they're not going to leave.
Right.
For example, they cut off the enterprise sales team commission at X number of dollars. That is the craziest thing. As a salesperson, that they're going to cap your commission at X number of dollars when you're selling millions of dollars of software.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and nobody, not one person on the team left. That's so crazy to me. And
Yeah.
that just seems like really just bogus on the company's part. But I mean,
Well,
they're making more money.
it's on both
Yeah.
sides because it works, right? Boeing St. Louis had that same strategy. if you're in aerospace in St. Louis, what other company are you going to go to? You have to move, and they know it. And so it works for a lot of the engineers that are comfortable. If born and raised in St. Louis, they don't leave, and they work underpaid for a huge portion of their career. So, part of me is like, it's a strategy that's working, but then I don't have any sympathy when they're like, "Well, you've only been here 2 years. How come are you leaving? You're not loyal enough." No, that you don't get both sides of that coin. I can see why you
But
do
they
it,
do,
but
dude. So many people would agree with that statement of like comparing you to being a homie hopper, job hopper. It's
who
like
who I have
I've heard
I've
people
gotten
say it.
zero real pushback on that.
I've heard a lot of people say it.
And I've
Maybe
even
because
so my resume, like I have changed jobs every year, whether it's promotion or a new company, right? And I've prepared myself to answer that question, but I've never been asked it.
like
Not
in the
once.
interview,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think it. I don't see it affecting interviews. Um,
If anything, it's more. I mean, that new person gets hired, gets paid more. Like it's
yeah.
the opposite.
So let's go on top of this. I had another thought during this podcast
Okay.
where I was like, it would be really cool. I don't know how it would work out, but say if like a big software company got in cahoots with like 10 other software companies and they're like, hey, let's have this development program for early stage software engineers or whoever. And let's, in the first 2 years, every 6 months, switch them between our companies. And then they figure out what they like. They get a lot of different exposure to different processes, different teams, different goals, and they're getting all these different flavors to become a better developer. And then they get to pick like where they want to go, or those 10 companies can offer them, and they get a lot better employee at the end of the day, an employee that knows what they want. Like that would be really cool if like a couple companies could get in cahoots with each other and design a program like that. Like I think that could be very successful because then you wouldn't be getting people who don't want to work for you. You'd be getting more well-rounded developers with more backgrounds in different projects, and it would be great for the employee themselves. It might be better for the employee than the companies, and maybe that's why they don't do it. But I think it'd be good for everyone, really.
Yeah. I mean, so the big corporations do it internally, especially for like the
That's
cream of the crop recruits, and they only do it for the top employees normally because it's an investment, right? You're not getting anything out of those employees for 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, they could leave, right? So you're taking a risk, and it works better with top talent because, you
I
know,
think it has to be top talent. I I think you do get maybe not the first 6 months or year, but I don't know. I would even argue, at least in software development these days, you would get like that first year or two. You're getting productivity in your top talent.
mm, it's, I have not had any experience where a level one, even if they have the most potential in the world, is anywhere close to, a 4 or 5 year employee.
You guys must not hire top tier talent.
No, it's just like you there's so much built in. I don't know. Now they will be way better at year 5 than the average person at year 5, but experience is a differentiator. Like, I mean, maybe there's that 0.1%, but
I would compare myself in my development field. This first year at this company, I had like a year and a half of experience before, maybe 2 years, no, a year and a half, and I would be operating as someone with like 4 years of experience.
you're at 3 years. I mean, that's
But like 1 year and at the, are you talking about like total experience?
no. I was thinking like fresh, like out of college. That first year's tough. It's
Yeah,
tough to
first year.
make a huge impact your first year. You just don't know. You don't know. You're still learning how to navigate the corporate world. You're still learning what it means to be a professional. Like some people get it, I'm sure. Some people come out of these awesome schools and they've been prepped for it their whole lives and they can hit the ground running. But I would say most, even the ones with big potential, they take time. I wasn't great my first year.
Yeah, I would agree. I guess
I thought
I
I
think
was.
the first year, um, you're probably going to see huge growth that first year.
Yeah.
Because I guess like say if I started at this job right out of college, yeah, it probably would have
And I
been.
think you're thinking about going from software dev to software dev. Most of those rotational programs are like different disciplines, right? You'll be in logistics and then you'll be in supply chain and then you'll be in quality and then okay, now I found a role as a business management as a manager, right? It's not like work with this software and then go to the next program, work with this software. I mean, there's those are out there, but
So I'm just going to go through all the thoughts I had during this podcast.
wait,
Another
wait,
thought I had.
wait. Why
But,
while we're on the topic of hiring, I had a
yeah.
couple other things. Unless you're talking hiring, I don't want to jump in front
Uh,
of you.
no, you can go. You can go.
So two things. He said his ideal hire is like, and I'll take the instead of the 10-year employee, I'll take the 2 years with someone that's shown an extreme learning curve. And I never heard anybody say that before. I really like that one. Like like I want to go ask somebody, tell me how you've shown to have an above average learning curve, right? How does this resume prove that to me? Where is the examples of this? I thought that was really good. So I'm using that one. I'll tell you that right now. And
Yeah,
then
I mean that's that's something that seems very obvious to me, and I don't think you see it enough. Mainly because I would like to think the issue is a lot of the hiring processes that don't do well enough at uh, finding that or being able to prove that they have a high learning curve. Those are my
Mhm.
initial thoughts.
Yeah, you're going to have to like that's the tough part with hiring because if you're a good talker, some people can talk their way around any question.
Mhm.
And that's the trouble with interviewing, just straight up interviewing. But I would imagine that if you're someone that truly demonstrated a high learning curve quickly, there should be fruits there. There should be promotions. There should be one of the things I always like to hear is like not that you went and found a new job to get a promotion, that you were lifted up into that. Like they saw my potential and they put me here. Like those things I think are downstream of having an extreme learning curve internal to a company. I think there's other ways. Hopefully you can parse it out. The other one was he thinks CEOs should spend a third of their time hiring. And
That
we've
was
heard this a
good.
couple times now that hiring should be a huge part of your job, right? If you're scaling, if you're a company that's scaling and your job as CEO isn't to do those tasks anymore, it's to find people to do this task, it makes a lot of sense to hire. He was talking about like going through references and calling this and that. And it's like the gut reaction is that is so much effort. But finding the right employee is so valuable.
So growing up, you always hear like, "Oh, you gotta have references for jobs." I've never heard of anyone having to give a reference or that happening. My
I think
thought though
it's
is that
higher up. It's
so
at that certain level. Like when he's talking about picking a CEO, it's what's in
yeah,
his mind.
because my initial thought is like, I, I mean, how many people are you going to be looking at hiring? Like maybe five that you're going to get references for, or three, final three.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a lot to ask of that person getting hired to go through their network and spend their people's time. Like I
Yeah.
get it's important, but that's just kind of it's almost surprising to me that that's something they do. I mean, it makes sense, but you're asking like, and then like you're gonna ask the people they're working with about a new job they want to go to. Like,
It's always
how do you not get bad reactions from those references? Like,
right.
I mean, because like you could be a really good worker, and but what if you have like someone who really doesn't want you to go, and they care more about the productivity of their team than that person? Like that, the person you're interviewing, the reference you're interviewing, maybe they're a bad apple. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
Well, and at Boeing, as a manager, they tell you not to give, like, if someone calls and asks, you don't give feedback, positive or negative, because apparently, if you give negative feedback, they can sue you as being discriminatory, trying to, keep them down, type of thing. And then positive, and you don't want to give another company a positive review on somebody. That's just one-on-one competition stuff.
yeah, and I guess also if we're talking about CEO positions, I think that's a big difference.
Yeah, there's obviously a bigger return the higher you get because they have more of an impact. Um,
Yeah. And like one of the things he said is like they would ask in the interview who are three world class people you've worked with, and if you're gonna get world class people, I mean they're probably gonna they're gonna be reasonable and whatnot. And
that
that
was a cool one. So he was talking about blitzscaling, and Uber, once they hire you, they tell you who's the best three people at your current job, and they would send them an offer, not interview them. And so
yeah
I love that idea. If you're good at hiring that person first, right? It's almost
yeah
like hire him. If he's a rock star, then 6 months later say, okay, who was the top three people the last job you worked at? Because I'm thinking about, I'm looking at that new job right now. And like one of the first things I'm going to do is there's three rock stars that work for me. And I'm going to immediately be like, where do these people fit in the new team? But that's like one of the things, like, go find that new company that is pushing the boundaries because they'll attract other talent, other top talent. Iron sharpens iron. You said that twice already.
it's kind of like the free market. It's just it's competition, right? It's the
Yep.
nature of competition. You
Yep.
have to keep bettering yourself and your company to to win the competition, right?
Mm-hmm. And if you choose the right project, like especially a hard project that pushes you to be better, and you have people around you that were attracted to this hard challenge, and it can really snowball. It's cool. Like when we were on the B-21, there was some killers on that program, and I remember being there at 6:30, but there was three other lights on in the hallway. I knew who all three of them were. And I was like, "You're not working late for me tonight." Like I remember having those thoughts. It's funny. That's where, like, I think our competitive nature really helps us.
Yeah, I think that would be like one of the things if I were asked like what sets me apart would be my competitive nature. Like, because I really like explaining that like I grew up with a competitive sports background.
Always
Always,
losing to your big brother.
yeah,
It's
right.
tough.
Um,
It's
and
tough.
like no one else applies any mentality like that to work. So like if you apply that to work mentality, you just like we're all professionals. You watch professional sports, and these people are optimizing their bodies. They're caring about their outcomes. If you just do a little bit of that, you're going to be one of the top workers instead of
Yeah.
someone who's just wanting to meet, possibly meet expectations of their company. Like it's not even fair to like. It is fair, but like it's you're going to be so much better. Just the competitive mindset of like I'm going to keep getting better and I'm going to keep producing better at my job. Like it's pretty simple to me, and it seems like the mindset's first the biggest thing that I would say sets me apart. So
Yeah.
I'm not that much. I'm not. I wouldn't even say I'm smarter than most people in the workplace, but I just I care about how well I'm doing, what I'm producing.
Yeah, and it's like grit, right? It's how well you network, it's people skills. I mean, it's funny how multifaceted successes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's like there seems to be a lot of small areas you can focus on that will get you like up in levels of your career. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you just focus a year on being competitive or being constant, like I'm going to be that 6 o'clock light on in the hallway, and my team lead or my manager is going to know that for this whole year. They're going to be
Mm-hmm.
surprised that I'm not there before then. You know, it's like if you just focus on one of those things, you're probably going to level up. Um, and then they just compound over the years, right? So if you start year one, focus on one thing, you're going to be doing that subconsciously. You're going to be showing up. It's not going to, you're not going to dread going to work early because you've been doing it the whole time. And then you can focus on the next thing. It's like, how do I be more competitive, or how do I help my team grow more? How do I knowledge transfer better? How do I, you know, um, I think it's, at least for me, I see it as just one small thing at a time. But that's all complex problems, systems, whatnot.
Yep.
We're only through like probably the first 30 minutes of the podcast.
Yeah, I had a lot of big ones left, and honestly, I was checking the watch for that time. Um,
Do you have to be off at a certain time?
what's that?
Do you have a hard
Basketball,
out?
brother.
But that's two, right?
Yeah, that's it too.
Okay.
Um, here's
Well, we just
here's
want to
what big
start
one.
hammering through these.
Yeah, here's
Hammering through
here
the.
here I got one for you. So one of the big thoughts I was having when I was listening to Reid talk about his lefty stuff, and you know, I'm one of the quad billion people that consider themselves in the middle, but we joke all the time. We don't think there's a lot of people in the middle.
Mhm.
Um, that in my childhood, Christianity dominated the U.S. and they they had all the power, and then it felt like the pendulum swung to liberalism that eventually turned into wokeism, right? And they had all the power, and it feels like it's swinging back. And the thought I had was like, I'm clearly rooting for the right now. I think they're more aligned to what I like. But if they're successful, and I think they will be, right? Because they have a lot of rock stars in that group right now. After about 10 years, they will stagnate. They will they will go too far right, and there will be a point in which that pendulum will swing back. And if you're truly in the center, right, as that pendulum goes back and forth, that means you're going to switch left again, right? So I guess I would ask anyone in the center, like, do you think you'll be on the left side of the aisle in the next 10 years? And if the answer is no, either that's short sighted, right? Because you don't really have a good understanding how fast things change, or I don't think you're in the middle.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a very accurate conceptualization of what's going on.
Do you remember the when the right dominated,
Yeah.
like Bush? Like, no, I was old enough to remember it. At least I think I remember it the right way. Maybe I'm missing it, but that was my understanding. It feels like there's been two pendulums in my life
Mhm.
politically.
All right. What's the next big one you got?
What else do I have?
Um,
Um, oh, pitch this podcast. I want to hear you pitch it.
this is podcast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can you pitch it?
All right. So
Why should
I
I
got
listen
the
to your podcast, Conley?
yeah. So this is one of my favorite podcasts, and Stephen
Not
Bartlett. He's
not this podcast. Our podcast.
oh.
Yeah, pitch our podcast.
All right. Well, if you love podcasts, if you love learning, maybe you're like me, who found themselves listening to podcasts day after day, week after week, and then maybe either not having any new ones to listen to, or you didn't have anyone to talk to about your podcast. It's like if you listen to a podcast, it's just great, but no one else ever listened to it. You kind of just that's it, and you move on and you listen to the next one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what this is it's the follow-up conversation. You're hearing the conversation that the dialogue you're probably having in your head listening to a podcast, and you get to actually hear that conversation uh, for like an hour with two people who are probably in the same exact shoes as you are. You're not listening to people who have been through all the fame and success and their possibly distorted point of views and opinions. You're listening to people who are working the same 50-hour weeks, 40, 60-hour weeks as you are, have that discussion. And they're two cool brothers that, love to learn, love to have fun. And I think you're going to have a good time listening to it. So join the follow up.
I love it. Clip that. Clip that. That'll be our first YouTube video. I like it. That was good.
Dang, you kind of called me out there.
That was good. Hey, I like when we listen to these and they have like examples being like, here you go, off the cuff, go.
I really want to put you on the spot, but now I feel like it would be different that you had to listen to mine first. But I'm really curious what you would have said.
I mean, it's similar, right? It's like one we're authentic. We're in our 30s. We're male. We know we're male, right?
I'm in my 20s. Yep.
Oh yeah, I forgot. You're a baby. But we have a lot of career ambition. We we're interested in getting better and smarter and always growing. Um, and I think that's a niche group locally. Like you're saying, it's hard to find people to talk to podcasts about, but nationally, I think it's a huge group. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a very important group because I think we're the ones that are going to take over the world. I don't mean that hyperbolically. I mean that literally. Like we will be the politicians of the next generation. We will be the business owners. We will be the CEOs and executives. We will be the venture capitalists. So uh, it it's a hang, right? We're not trying to sell you anything. We're not shoving ads down your face. We're just talking about topics we find interesting, and I think people don't have enough of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you hear it a lot is you're similar to the closest five people you spend time with. So if you want to be those people, the successful people, the ambitious workers, the people next in line to be the CEOs, the founders, politicians, you got to be put in conversations with them, you know, and sooner
Mm-hmm.
or later. And that's a big reason why I like podcasts. It's because that's putting me in the room with these people.
It really is.
And
You
so,
start comparing yourself to them.
and
You
then
start
you see
judging yourself.
decisions being made at work, and you can analyze them of like how you should actually be thinking about them, like not at the individual worker level, but at the company level. Like, does it make sense? Like most of the things the company's doing, like makes sense, and it's like I understand it when other people at the company are like, "This is a stupid new policy," but no, it's like if you're thinking about it at the company level, it makes sense in terms of like innovating towards success, you know. And then like if there's areas that the company's not doing that, well then that's your in, that's your way of go write a memo, go submit that to your project manager, send it up the chain, send it all the way up the chain if it's a good memo, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
those are the opportunities that are going to be inevitable. They're going to come across sometime, but are you prepared? You know, are you prepared to act on it when you get
Yep.
there? Like, have you had these discussions? Have you been listening to those people, and developing yourself?
Yeah. No, for real. Um, let's see what else I have.
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
So I had a couple big ones. One
Okay.
was one of the things I just love listening to when he was talking about early stage companies, and he was explaining them at like a conceptual level as there's three phases, and it's just like
Oh yeah. The
countries where
the
it's like the
Marines, the
Marines
armies, the
storm the
police.
beach, that's go to market. Armies win the country over, that's like early stage investment. And then police govern the country, and that's like once it's like IPO'd or once the company is actually uh, profitable. I was like, that's such a cool concept. And
Mm-hmm.
that stuff I really like taking away. Like listening to these people talk about those concepts, it's something that I wouldn't have came up with for a really long time or be able to recognize.
Yeah.
And it's really cool that they can like kind of conceptualize that out. And that's like one of the things I really liked about the podcast. And then on top of that, part of the podcast, he was talking about his relationship with Elon Musk and when Elon Musk pitched him SpaceX, which was honestly just hilarious when you think about it. But what that got me thinking
The most
about was,
valuable company in the world, right?
yeah, and well,
One of
one,
them.
it was just a crazy. It explains what it means to be a founder, how like bought in you have to be, how ambitious you have to be,
Yeah.
genuinely. Um, but a thought I had on top of that was it's going to be crazy in 100 years, where SpaceX is the new Facebook Meta of the world, and they're super dominant. They're controlling Mars, and they turn woke because
Yeah.
it's going to happen. It Elon Musk's going to be gone. They're gonna have company
Look
rock.
at all of his companies: PayPal, woke, um, OpenAI. Well, not woke, but rebelled against Elon. That's for sure.
I mean, it's inevitable, and to to understand it's inevitable, it's really crazy to think about
Yeah,
that. That's gonna be SpaceX one day. Like your kids are gonna know a SpaceX they don't like.
that's
Like
right.
NASA, we don't like NASA anymore because they're just corrupt. They're bogged down. They're
Right.
not innovating anymore. You know, it's like this isn't the NASA that you knew in the '70s that was taking you to the moon. Um,
And that's why it's so like the free market's so important because if you don't have free market, those companies that are decaying stay in power because they buy power, right? They
mhm.
buy that moat around the company through legislation, through lobbying, and it's like and also it's hopeful. Like if you think there's no way I could ever compete with Google, there will be a time when Google falls off. When they get off their game, they will get complacent. That's every great country has been that way. Every great company. It's very rare to stand the test of time like that. And that means if you're not on top of the chain, if you're ambitious enough, you can, through time, beat those big boys that seem unbeatable.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's probably gonna be within my lifetime that we'll see it, right? But it's gonna be so weird one day when I'm looking at SpaceX and I see the headline and they're doing something stupid.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be like, I remember when they were the ambitious startup getting to Mars
Yep.
before all this success. I'm gonna be
Yep.
like, man, it's sad that Elon's still not there. And it's gonna just be it's gonna be one of those moments I look back on it and a lot of all these thoughts are going to go through my head.
Right.
But it was a cool thought to have. And another thing about doing this podcast is I have like, I think I've explained five different, maybe six different, just kind of out there ideas that just sparked off this, like threads in my head that started from listening to this. And that's what a good podcast is to me is like, I start to think about those things and you get lost in it.
Yeah.
That's one bad thing about doing this podcast because I have to take notes. I'm like, I gotta write this thought down. I was like, and so like I'm really like bringing stuff out of my head, um,
Mhm.
and documenting it to like to be able to revisit because and it's good because a lot of times they just go through my head and then they're lost. So it's kind
Yeah,
of
it
cool to be
cements
able
it
to.
more. I
Hmm.
have the same thing. It's like when you write it down and then talk about it and explain it, it's like it's locked in. It's not going anywhere now.
And you get to evaluate whether it's a good idea or not because
That's
like
true.
there's some like I'll either write down or start to talk about. I'm like, no, I was wrong. Bad take.
That's funny. But so here's my next big one. It's like it's sad when you see these super successful people without kids. And
Yeah.
and so I have a couple thoughts to kind of spin off that. Is like one, like he said it, having a kid is like a startup. And nothing could be more true. Like he nailed that one. But is that why people are having less kids? Is that part of it? Because that applies to every layer, right? It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or a lower level engineer. Having a kid is detrimental to your career, right? It is attention that you can't give all your ambitions, right?
Mhm.
And two, it's like how many, like a lot of these are very successful people. Obviously, I think a lot of them would be great parents. And how many kids did we lose with high potential that would have been in great scenarios, right? Had all the resources to do great things. Are we losing because there's this one generation worth of advantage to not have one?
Yeah. I think these are like compound effects that are really hard to measure. Something that a lot of these people talk about are these compound effects, stuff like that. Um,
It's funny
is
because
that
like,
is that something that AI helps with? Do you get more free time?
well,
Do you talk to
yeah,
your people rise and they rise but don't require as much work, therefore raising more of those people? Like, is that a long term effect?
it could be like if there's no more career to chase,
Well,
you
I
know.
don't even know if I'd go as far as that. I would say, like, if you can address these high level issues, if you can develop on and engineer on these high level issues without working 80-hour weeks, you get down to like 50-hour weeks.
I think there'll still be the people that work 80 hours
Yeah.
that'll win.
Yeah. You might get one or two of them back.
I mean,
And they'll have
all of
some
these,
effect.
all of the Western progress is highly correlated with lower childbirth. And I don't see this one being different unless it fundamentally changes our purpose, right? If AI plus robots take all of our need to work away, then you could see humans going back to what fulfills them outside of career, right? When all the resources are abundant and everyone has everything they want. But the other thing about it is it's like sad. Like part of me seeing that interview and watching it on YouTube, it's like I don't know how much joy did this guy miss out on because he didn't have kids.
Yeah,
It's kind of
I can
tragic.
see that. Well, like it seems like you saw someone who put all their marbles in one jar, who put all their time into one thing, and you wonder if they could have had a more a better life if they chose to not work as hard
It
or as much.
it's for me. It's like you're gonna have everything you want up until you're like 60, but as soon as your health starts declining, I guess if you're a billionaire, you could pay for these awesome senior homes. But like,
Yeah,
where's that love? Where's the Christmas? Everyone comes to my house because I'm
I think,
grandpa and I have a big living room.
and here's a great point. This is why you got to start consolidating different point of views, right? Because then you have the other end of the spectrum where I can't ever remember Calloway.
Galloway.
Anywho, um, you have him where he was like, get a number in your head, and once you get to that number,
Start
um,
giving it away.
giving it away.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like, I would say the other end of the spectrum instead of just diving into VC and, and
Yeah.
trying to make more. Um, and I think that's another maybe thing we bring to the table is we are consolidating all these different point of views. And instead of having the different ends of the pendulum and Reid Hoffman and Tucker Carlson, Andrew Shapiro. These people are so popular because they're so polarizing in their point of views that it's nice to have someone who's consolidating them and hopefully is, as we say, in the middle. uh,
Yeah,
yeah. I think you have any other? I think we hit all my big ones.
me too.
Uh,
I have a ton of
I
other notes, but no more big ones.
any ones you want to rattle them off before we go to takeaways?
Let's see. I think there's some really good stuff about like the successful CEOs. They have to have self-awareness, but be ambitious. They have to be persistent but flexible. They have to be right now versus long term. And that's I think like if you're looking how do I get ahead in my career, I would start trying to implement those. Right? You got to attack the right now, but the long-term vision is what gets you where you need to be. Those type of things like not being on either side of that coin, but being on both sides is a huge advantage. I like that part. Um, the Spotify one was really interesting, where he said Spotify's
Oh yeah,
strategic advantage was not being in the U.S. right, where the rest of the tech giants were born. It was being in I don't know, was it
somewhere
Finland,
over in Europe,
Sweden, so
Sweden. Okay.
some northern European country. But they didn't have to compete with all the big record labels. It was cheap there, so they could build their platform. And then once they figured out how to have a good platform, then they went global and they competed with the big boys. I thought that was it was an interesting lens because his whole point was you may not be born in Silicon Valley in the 70s and have the biggest advantage ever, but that doesn't mean you don't have advantages
Hmm.
wherever you are. You just got to find them and know what they are. I like that one a lot. Um, The other one was the burnout one. That was the last one I had. Is he described Elon as like the leader that would use you until you were burnt out, and the people that left would have one of two opinions. I loved working for Elon, um, but I couldn't do it again, or I hated work for Elon and I'd never do it again. But he would push him to the limit. I had a VP like that. I think I've talked about this before, but he used you for all you had, and then as soon as you ran out, he would go find someone else. And he didn't have any bones about it. At least he never like appeared of having any emotions
Yeah.
about it. But he's one of the people I respect most because the amount of stuff he could do and bring out of you, because he brought the best out of me. Because I was constantly striving to give him more because he always demanded more. And you really learn what your limits are. And I would say at being in it, I hated it. When it was gone, I missed it because not only was he bringing the best out of me, he was bringing out the best out of everyone around you. And the progress you make under that scenario is something you could really be proud of, but
Hmm.
you can't do it forever. So,
He
you
did
know,
a very good job at like explaining the different approaches, and Reed
yes,
did with like
yeah,
Elon versus whoever at Google or Zuckerberg at Facebook.
right,
I don't think I knew Elon was like very ambitious. I've seen the SpaceX like the letters that the emails that went out at SpaceX like we're not here for having 4 weeks of PTO. We're here to get people to Mars. If
right,
we're gonna leave, like leave.
right,
Um, but I don't know if I've ever really put it
which is
together as
awesome.
he's using you as a tool. Like
Right,
as the job, you need to understand that you do not need to be emotional about that decision. It's already been made, and you're here to work and we're gonna do great things, but we're not here to play patty cake. And it's
yeah,
like it really it's funny. It's like I can directly relate it to like the coaches I've had. I've like uh,
Yeah.
I think if you've been in sports, you probably had at least a coach like that, where it's like we're working here.
Yep.
Um,
And
but
you find that some kids respond by not loving the sport anymore and quitting.
yep.
And was that the right strategy? It's just like it's funny how many different ways there are to do.
Let's last topic. Which one are you? Which one? Maybe not.
Okay.
Which one do you think you would be able to create the most productive team with? And what, like, if you had the opportunity, which one would you go with?
So this is I have real world examples here. Fortunately, I'm lucky to have that. When I took this latest job, I wanted to do that. I wanted to try it, maybe like 75%, 80% of it, because I knew that culture in Huntsville was a lot less crazy than the culture in Palmdale. Like Palmdale is where you go to make a career. Huntsville where you go to retire, type of thing. It's just a different attitude, right? So I couldn't bring 100% of it over, but I did want to kind of shock the system a little bit when I got here, and I found that it wasn't me. I couldn't keep it up. It wasn't authentic. So I would say I did about 40% of it and got great results. But now I'm starting to think about my next opportunity, and I think I'm going to crank it up to 50, if that makes sense. And you see how close I can get to that edge. And part of it, I think it'll work better. Maybe I can get 70%. Because it's more of a startup. It's more of a we're here to do something crazy, right? We're here to upset the giants, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's people
Yeah.
that own this market. We're here to take it from them, right? And you're kind of signing up for that when you sign up for a company like this. So I think that that culture will align better with the company and will be more successful because of it. So,
What something I struggle with. I think will be my. I don't know if I can recognize it as a bad thing or a good thing yet. But people who aren't ambitious or people you feel like you have to push, I'm like, I don't know if I want to put any effort towards them. I don't. My first reaction is I don't want to put effort towards them. Like, I shouldn't have to convince you to want to be a producer, someone important on the team.
mhm.
I don't even want you on the team if you're not going to be someone who wants to be to have an important role on the team. Is that a bad thing? Do I need to, like, as a leader, does that need to is it something that can be unique to me and it can go good or bad, or is that like I need to figure out how to motivate people more? I feel like I do need to figure out how to motivate people more because I'm so self motivated that it's not like a thought. It's not something that goes through my head, and I find that's where I feel most disconnected with people. Thoughts.
Yeah, if you want to be the best, you're going to have to be able to impact the whole group. You won't be able to get rid of the people that don't buy in. They're a part of the team, they're part of life, right? So you got to get the best out of the bell curve. The bell curve you have a few number of excellent, you have a big average, you have a few number of terrible. You might be able to get rid of the terrible, right? And if you can, it's a huge win. Um, but you also have to get the average because that is the bulk, and
Well,
the average won't have that same passion you do. That's what makes them average. But most of your team will be average, even if you're great at hiring, even if you're great at whatever, right? You can shift that right a little bit, but that bulk is where most of your work gets done, and you have to be able to optimize that.
how do you have any words of advice for motivating that bottom line? Like, how
So,
do you address that? Do you try to create
motivation's tough,
incentives? Do you
right?
try to give a
It's
perspective? Like,
I've had leaders that are motivating, and they get up on the stage, and at the end you're like, oh man, that was I'm ready, let's go, I'll run through the wall for you. That's not me. I don't think it's me. um and that in my experience, fades. Uh, I find it hard to constantly be the guy up there lighting that fire. I don't think that is sustainable. To me, it's like a system, right? So I define the process. I make it crystal clear. This is what we are going to do. I set those expectations, and then every quarter I raise the bar, right? This is what averages. This is what averages. And if they don't, one, I think the people in the middle that are average, they fit into their surroundings, right? So if the rest of their peers slightly gets better, they don't mind getting slightly better, right? They kind of like being in that. That if you take what a normal person
I think
does,
it's the definition of average, right? They're gonna move to where average is, right?
yeah. But if you tomorrow say now you have to do 10 times more, you're gonna have them bitch and moan and complain and all that stuff. If you slowly but surely get their peers to do 10 times more over 5 years, then you'll hear no bitching and moaning. So it's like, how do you slowly raise the temperature of that? And to me, it's like small, achievable goals that they buy into. Hey guys, how do we get a little bit faster in this? I have an idea. This. Okay, we're going to do this, and our new goal is going to be that. And you make this happen, and now everyone's just like, oh, it's a new standard. You slowly raise that standard up.
See, I would like to operate like what I would like to do is create competition, but I don't know if that would
That's a
work
big part of it. So, like,
because like if I give someone this small project, I would expect that someone's like, "Well, why didn't I get that one?" Like, I'm not gonna get a
so you can like
raise.
compensate people with titles. People aren't motivated by titles. They just are. We're prideful people, and then compensation. But you gotta get it's compensation is hard because you gotta get so many people on the same page. At least in corporations, right? I think if you had a small startup, you could really do the compensation thing. I would make it very dramatic. My top performer would get 10%, and my bottom performer would get zero. Like it would be dramatic. It's not like this 3 to 5% range that most corporations do. I would seriously have at least 5% of my team get zero. To be crystal clear, you are at the bottom. You are not performing as expected. We are not going to pay you more.
I couldn't agree more. I think I understand you can't have like a 7 or 50% difference, but I think there should be different categories because from what I've witnessed, is there's always that top 10, 15% of employees that are just different, right? And they never seem to be compensated for that difference. I think there should be categories. I think actually uh, what my company just switched to is a lot more competitive landscape that's actually kind of addressing that. So I'm excited about that.
It's also helpful to have data that you can objectively say, "Hey, look, you are average, right? Or you are
Here's
not.
a here's a
You think you're top. You're not. Here's why."
so you're a big data guy. I think you mentioned that you when you come into the new team, you created a way to analyze people on data, their performance on data. How do you implement how do you consider like to me because you're not gonna have as much motivation for kind of team support. Um, do you address that in any way? Like, how do you address people worried about their performance in terms of the data you're capturing and maybe not spending an hour or two in the afternoon helping someone needing help on a project or their development issue? Like, how do you address that?
So, like, you have to be very meaningful in what your data measures for that exact reason, right? You got because the people will optimize to whatever data you tell them matters. So you got to be very careful of not measuring the wrong thing. One, two. I'm not the big team builder guy. I'm not the big. Let's look out for each other. I'm lucky to have two of those on my team right now, and I just let them do it. Honestly, that's like one of my, I would say, not strengths. Um, because I've been kind of raised and I subscribe to the Bill Belichick model. It's like everyone do your job. If you do your job well, you don't need to help anybody else.
See,
If
but
everyone does their job.
that seems to apply to what I was saying of like the people you feel like you have to push. Because if you don't have those people on the team, you can take that approach. If you're in the NFL, you can take that approach. But when you have the people who need motivated, like you're not going to get those. You know, you're going to lose those. At least how I'm seeing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, unless you have a ton of power like Belichick did, you you're going to have some people help other people, and that's where the team builder guy is valuable. It's very valuable.
So
And
it's
that person's often empathetic, kind of like mom, right? Cares about, like, genuinely cares about everybody.
mhm.
Um,
they're all
and
they're built different. There are those people out there.
yep,
Um, it is crazy. So great example. Sorry if this is weird, but the Mr. Beast TV show on Amazon. It
it's
starts with
fantastic.
yeah, the very first episode starts with 1,000 people. They get down to 500, and they have rows of 100 people, and they have 10 rows of 100 people, and the very first challenge is one person in each row has to sacrifice themselves, or else the whole row loses. And the last 3 rows to have someone sacrifice himself is completely out. So 300 people out. And 7 rows of people had one person in each row sacrifice themselves, and that just proves the point that there it's a great reason why we have to have different people, different mindsets, you know? Like you
It,
to have that good team, you have to have those people. Like they're out there too. I forget that they're out there. I forget that I think you just forget people have different mindsets than you.
yeah. It. Can we talk about Mr. Beast for a second? Second, and how awesome he is,
Yeah,
dude.
crazy, man.
First off, yes, he did the world's most entertaining psychological experiment ever. Are you still with me? Are you still with me?
Kind of.
I can't hear you.
How about now?
Yeah, I got you. Um, like, talk about psychological experiments. That was awesome. That was
Did you
it was 2 hours.
how
It
far
was
into it are
awesome.
you?
I watched both episodes.
Okay, I've only watched one, but I was thinking about messaging everyone and be like, "This is awesome." But yeah,
It
it's
was
like
fantastic.
all the social experiments are done in this game show, and it's
Yeah,
awesome.
and what I love about Mr. Beast is, like, Hollywood could have done this show. Like,
Hmm.
what were they? That's a perfect example where we talk about where Hollywood has gone completely complacent. Right? They are just looking for someone to upset them and become the new Hollywood.
But there were never in media. There was never genuinely a free market till the internet came around, and that's what
Right.
it is.
Here it is. Here it is. This is
It's awesome.
one kid from his basement constantly reinvesting in it until he's doing this, which is just like, he's like, "Oh, that Squid Game show was awesome. Why don't we do that in real life? And we'll do it
Maybe we
huge."
do his episode on Rogan. Have you listened to that?
I did. I don't remember much about it.
I
But yeah, we
think
should. I
yeah.
think that'd be cool. His story's cool.
He
He's genuinely inspiring.
I've listened to a lot. He's on other podcasts, but he is so cool because he's such and he's an open book. Like he says exactly what makes him successful, and he wants to teach other people it, and it's really
That's
cool.
cool.
And the fact that he does that, because like it's such against the model, right? It's
Yeah.
like he's just putting his cards out on the table, and he's
Yeah.
saying you can't stop this momentum.
No. Dude, that was a very cool show. I was happy. It's like one of those people you're glad that when they're successful.
Hmm. Yeah, he's a super competitive person.
Really.
I've heard him talk about his playing poker and stuff, and he's like, he would be fun to hang out with. He'd be awesome to hang out with.
That's cool.
All
All
right, we
right.
probably need to wrap.
Let's wrap.
Takeaways, go ahead.
Oh, mine's the AI person on my team. I'm going to use AI to not hire as many people and just replace them with AI. Because I don't want to replace people with AI. I want to take the people I have and make them more powerful. And I think I'm onto something. I think I'm gonna be the very first person on that ledge.
Sounds good. I like it. The AI implementation engineer.
That's right. That I'm
Um,
gonna send you that when the posting goes live. I'm gonna send it to you.
sounds good. I kind of made up that coined that position.
Put it on Wikipedia right now.
I'll put it on my cover letter. I'll be like the clip. um. Anyways, yeah, I had like three takeaways. My first one was when I was listening to this, I had ideas I sent over to the guy I was working on the app with, and it was different uh early stage or like founder ideas. It was I even had a thought back to the Coinbase episode with Brian Armstrong in his very first company with that tutoring website that he made. Um, and when he made that website, he had a growth issue where tutors were outsourcing. They were going around after they do one session, they would not go through him anymore, and they'd pay directly. So he was losing money on it. And when he went dormant, he when he wanted to leave the website, he was at like I think like 100,000 or like 50,000 users, and so he made it a free model, completely free model, where if you wanted to I think like post your page or he turned advertisements on the website and it went from like 50,000 to like a million users. I was like, so my takeaway was that when I'm thinking about these long-term big ideas to reference people who have done it before, to genuinely take away things from these podcasts, from these founders. Because as I'm growing, I think I'm going to find the people who've already done it and want to acknowledge their takeaways from it. So that was my takeaway. I think I had two other takeaways, but I can't think of them right now on top of my head. But and you probably need to go. This is the longest episode, so thanks for tuning in.
Yeah,
Any
episode
last words?
13.
All right,
No.
that's a wrap.